Welcome to the Stop Shrinking Socialcast. I'm your host, Julia Mallory. This series of interviews examines what it means to shrink. Shrinking isn't just playing it small, but it's any time that we do the opposite of what allows us to honor our truth. This series will feature dope and dynamic people that demonstrate the complex layers and resilience of the human spirit. Their lived examples show us that perfection isn't required for living one's purpose. Let's get into it. Desiree Thompson is an herbalist and energy worker. You can find her work at nana.catherines.apothecary.com and on Instagram by the same name. Des, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed on the Stop Shrinking Socialcast.
Always.
Oh, okay.
Listen, this is life. This is real.
I'm not even going to edit that out. We're just going to...
I like it. It's about.
We're just gonna keep it pushing because it's literally pandemic life, right?
Yes, it's fine.
Yeah. So let's just get right into our chat today. Mm-hmm. Tell me one way that you used to shrink.
One way that I used to shrink. Well, what's so funny about this question is it took me like a minute or thinking about it because I have made my whole life about shrinking. So that question is like, well, which 20 ways? But I think being the Virgo rising that I am, in thinking about it, I wrote down all the ways and then I tried to find a through line. And I think one of the biggest through lines and what I'll offer as a response to that is believing that I deserve to be alone. Yes. That is one way that it was like a core belief that had a lot of tentacles. So that looked like not asking for help, over identifying with my work, like what I could do for other people, being very attached to outcomes, like those sort of things to triage this very deep trauma like piece of me that says, you are inherently deserving of being alone. We know that because look at all these things that happen in your childhood. Mm-hmm. And so to really own that and take that in and kind of troubleshoot against it, I would do all of these other things. But the core of that was deserving that I, should be alone or I have to be alone or that is kind of my lot in life. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the ways that I performed, a lot of the ways that I projected other people's wants or desires or validation of me stem from this thing of I deserve to be alone, which is, that's very, very, it's an origin. Yeah.
Wow. So would you say that in connection to believing that, I guess you did identify a specific thing, which was not even wanting to ask for help.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Not even wanting to ask for help.
Yep. And I think too, it's this thing of using earlier examples of violence, pain, ways that, again, from a very young age, my access to certain things was denied. Then in my very, early developmental ideas about I'm putting 1 + 1 together and I'm coming up with, there is something about me that is deeply connected to just being alone. I'm gonna have to do this alone. I must deserve that. So, okay. So I'm gonna just be the person that, you deserve to be alone. And so you kind of have to find ways to navigate society, knowing that at the end of the day, you're gonna have to just do all the things yourself because you were alone, you are alone, you will be alone, which is a very, very dangerous and insidious core belief that shows up in a lot of the ways that I would just overdo or overcompensate or try to for this feeling of well, I guess if I'm gonna be alone, I guess, I'll do everything myself, and that's it's not true. It's,
Did you feel like, because hearing you describe it, and maybe, you've made peace with it, but hearing you describe it, do you feel like during that time when you were kind of rationalizing it or accepting it,
right.
Did it feel like a negative to you?
It did because, well, I'll answer that two ways. One way in which I like retroactively, I'm like, oh, that was like rooted in a lot of like capitalism trauma. This thing of like, I just do it myself, I gotta do myself, can't depend on anybody. That is inherently very capitalist. But I think back then for me, it just seemed like the most likely reason why I wasn't being helped, or why people didn't offer, or why, there wasn't being space made for me in my relationships. I was just like, oh, it must be because that is just sort of like a part of who I am, or a part of how I have to operate in this world.
Right.
That, I think, is really related to this idea of like how worthy or how valuable I see myself, which is measured against how people treat me. So sorry, boo. We are, all the all the technical is using what is missing in my life, or what I didn't get, as an indicator of like some, like lack of worth in me. Because I'm like, if I didn't deserve this, that this not sort of like this aloneness, then people would help me, then people would be there, then people, and so it was a very, again, I made it at a young age. So I think that's different from people who are independent, or have a spirit or an energy of like, okay, I'm gonna chart my own course. That's different. Hiding yourself in overwork or in identity of like, I don't need help, which really it comes from a place of hurt and just not getting it at a time when learning what's possible for us in the world and in relationships. For me in particular, especially on the like emotional compassion, like people in my life who are like, oh, I see you, let me help you. That really wasn't, that's not how I was raised. And so I just decided that, I there was something about me that is just naturally wired to like having to be alone. And so I'm just like, fine, then I'll be the person who doesn't need any help. I'll be the person who doesn't need relationships. I'll just be the person who, is defined by their work, or that's how I'll show people. I'll just work really hard and be good at my jobs or whatever I'm doing. And so it took me a long time to separate me and my own deservingness of love and compassion and to be seen, which we're all entitled to. Like, ain't just me.
Right.
Entitled to that, but being able to separate that truth from the very real reality that there are things that I didn't get, and being like that it does not correlate with you somehow out of everybody in the world not deserving to be in community and in relationships and be seen in a way that validates your you-ness, your brilliant you-ness. So but it creeps up every now and again, because the society will glorify overwork. It will glorify being like autonomous or like not needing help, which, that's not real.
It's not real. I think a lot of folks can definitely relate to what you're saying in terms of, so like, we know sometimes philosophically, like certain things are our birthright, right? Yep. But when it kind of presents itself and we don't have the real lived experience.
Exactly.
If all we know is kind of the opposite, it's like, yeah, I know I deserve to be happy. I know I deserve joy. I know I deserve ease. But if everything in my life is running counter to that, and I think that just trying to work around that trauma response, because it is also a very lived reality, right? Yeah. It's not like, oh, you just woke up one day and make these things up in your head. It's like, oh no, I literally see that people are not helping me. I literally see that I don't get the support that I need. And I think the other side of that too is kind of when we get into those the weird way in which we tell people that they are what they attract. And so when we see a lot of folks questioning themselves and saying, oh, well, there must be something wrong with me because I've attracted 5 different, versions of the same person. And it's like, well, maybe it's just that person, that type of person is common. And
yeah, exactly.
So it's not always like, what we attract, but possibly what we accept, but also our acceptance of things is also rooted in whether or not we have an understanding of our full self. Right.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, that really bothers me when people are like, oh, that's because you, and it's like, I don't know if that tells the full story.
Yeah. I'm like, cause again, like look at the context in which you were trying to create. Right. Like there are so many ingrained societal, the idea that, at least in a physical way, like if you don't see this in your life, it is your fault. I think this blame thing is really triggering for me again, because that is basically what I had to adopt as a mindset as a very young child, trying to make sense of everything. And so it just, when people say that, I'm just like, wow, so you're really telling 5-year-old Desiree that these things are her fault. Yeah, and I reject that.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we understand just how we want to see the totality of the adult in front of us, but it's like that adult started with a child.
It is. Yes.
I think we also like the idea of old souls and all this other type of stuff, but it's no, children literally are children. They lack the experience to process at an adult level because they literally don't have the experience of processing at that level. And they also don't have enough of life experience to put their 5-year-old self in context.
Exactly. And people, and I'm learning in my anatomy class that before we develop those mid-level and higher aspects of our brain, the only people who can do that for us are the people around us. Basically our parents act as our mid and higher level brains. And so from 0 to 5, if you're not getting that, compassionate external shaping, your brain is literally developing with these beliefs, I deserve to be alone. No one's going to help me. And then you just kind of, then you do sort of try to manage. You try to manage all that with your tiny little baby self, and that doesn't go away just because
it's not just the words. When you're small, it's not just people's words to you. Yeah. You literally are paying attention to people's actions. Right? That's where we literally are tapping into that. So if the actions are not aligning with the words, that's when we're learning what words mean. That's when we're learning to code language. And so if I don't have the right actions around me, I will never develop. I won't say never, but it's, at that age,
harder. Yeah.
It's harder. And then that's when we're trying to catch our adult self up to our child self because we didn't get those skills. We don't get not the skills. We just literally didn't get the actions. We didn't get the support or the resources. So trying to formulate that later, it's not impossible, but it's difficult.
It's hard. And it's that's this thing of me being predisposed to or deserving of aloneness is I say it out loud and I'm just but that's not true. But it's well, how could I have thought anything else?
If that is what I literally got. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's why I said even the philosophical piece, I'm always saying that philosophically, I know a certain thing, but now I got to feel it in my body. Exactly. I have to feel it in community. Now I have to make the people around me who are telling me this thing to make it true.
Yes.
I try to help me believe it by showing me that it is possible.
Yep. And that has felt like a bigness, me being able to trust and to explore, okay, well, maybe that's not true, but I have to, you have to, that has to be a very body, I am moving and trying to embody a different way or a different truth that in the beginning, I'm I don't know. I still feel there's more evidence to suggest that
Right.
You kind of have to keep going, holding that truth. No, you don't deserve to be alone. Let's, now that you are older and can and can contextualize, and you can explore, and it might be a little safer to try different things, like, allow the universe to show you, allow the people that you have in your life to show you that is not, so it's, but that was a huge way that I kept myself small, was just by believing that, like, oh yeah, you're just supposed to be alone. That's what it is.
And I think it's a lot too, because, and I understand why people are like, I know it may make sense for me to do this healing work in that context, but I've already survived enough. I don't know if I can survive it not being true. I don't know if I can survive another round of this. So you understand why people were like, I already made it out.
Yeah.
I already made it out. Don't know if I need to go back to be okay. And so then we're showing up trying to tell people like, oh no, maybe you should come, let's just kind of go back through the jungles of everything that happened so that we can make you better and whole and more likely to survive, this go round if you basically go back and rescue your child self. It's a lot. Or not even the child self, because we know trauma can happen at any interval.
Right.
But especially the child self, because as adults, like, that's the furthest thing away from us in time. So.
Yep. It's so much. Yeah, how we operate is, I know I'd respond to a lot of things as my 5-year-old self. Like, and I can see her when she comes through. I'm like, oh, okay. So, anybody who is engaging in that work or thinking about it, it is a slow, and has to be a slow and, like, compassionate unfolding. So, if you like take a peek in that place and you're like, nah, I'm not with it right now. Like, that's, fine, because
it's gonna have to be okay.
It's gonna have to be okay.
Because you do have to fully commit to the process. Like when Shanti and I we talked about how, like, some of us, we grow up, but, did we become grown? Right? Like, we got older in age, but because of certain life experiences, we might be stunted in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Yeah. Ooh, I feel like we could talk about this for so long. Ooh, so tell me your work in progress area. I know, and I know for some people, because I've had people kind of answer the question like, well, girl, I literally just talked about it. I'm gonna just talk about that first thing some more. But if it's the same thing, that's cool. If it's like something different, that's cool too. So tell me you're like, this is my work in progress.
So it will be a different one. Again, I think it probably it's related, it's related for sure. But for me, I think the place where I'm still working is being able to accept or abide with an appropriate amount of heartbreak or heartache. And your post that you made a couple of days ago about acceptance, really just in general about, accepting your reality without necessarily accepting the circumstances that brought you there, kind of really like, yes, that's exactly this thing of like, again, because my trauma response was in the vein of over control and being able to assess and predict outcomes. Like, I'm not going to do this thing if it's not going to have this outcome. It's because I just didn't have the resilience and the tools to be able to handle when things are heartbreaking or when things are like in a deep level, like, oh, like that hit me. And so, one of the major ways that I avoided that was just to not really get in relationship with people, to not be vulnerable with people, to not be intimate. Because I'm like, then you won't break my heart. I won't have to deal with like your humanness, which is going to involve a certain level of heartbreak. Life, being alive, is going to involve a certain level of feeling heartbreak. And I see it all the time in my interactions with friends that are really difficult, my interactions with my son that's really difficult. I am learning that I can be deeply hurt and still kind of keep moving because I don't deserve to be alone. That is not so it's all sort of related, but it's really hard for me because I still want to look at conflict or hard moments as an indicator that, okay, I just need to do something different, or I just need to get rid of this person, or I just need to, like, I still look at it like a, like a system of pluses and minuses. like what formula are you using, girl? Like, what is it? This plus minus all these people, minus trying this thing, minus, it really is it's an extraction. I'm like taking things away to try and mitigate this heartbreak, which is just inherent to being alive. And I get to experience all of that. I get to experience the heartache, the joy, I get to meet those just naturally occurring things in life with my full self. But it's really hard because when things touch that like deeply hurt places in me, those places where I haven't dealt with grief, or the, things that call forth or call back to places of just things that are unresolved, I just want to bounce like that. I just want to stop. I just want to stop, get it away, and then move on. But that does such a disservice to myself. It does service to people who are trying. Again, this is not for the people who are not trying to be, in relationship compassionately with me, but for people who are trying to, being able to accept an appropriate amount of heartbreak, if that is what's in my reality, without necessarily accepting or being okay with the circumstances. But I am able to kind of hang with my reality in a different way. But it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, no, I think, is it Baldwin that I know Baldwin said something to the effect that like all life is risk. And I think that might even extend it to love.
Mm-hmm. And, yep. Absolutely.
It's definitely, so much of what we're taught about love, life, and relationships is so ridiculous that it's just not real. And I think part of the thing, this idea that just because people love us, that there will never be disappointment, that you won't ever feel that little sting, it's just not realistic. But I love the distinction that you made. This is for the folks who are actively trying to be in relationship and community with me, not the people who are not trying to do the work.
Right. And so who are not accountable. Yeah.
We're not accountable. And I think for so many of us, we get caught up in chasing the folks who are not trying to do the work, and understanding that, that's part of the relationship. Part of the relationship is being equally invested in making things right or making things work. It can't be.
Yeah, go ahead, Boo. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it just can't be on one person.
Yeah. And I feel like that this thing of a relationship with people, 2 people, 3 people, group, whatever, however many people, being on one accord of like trying to have a compassionate and just relationship. I didn't have very many models for that. So I think a lot of people take different tacks with trauma. Like some people do the thing where they completely enmesh themselves with everybody, trying to, which is again, like, it makes sense, especially if things were denied to you at a young age. But for me, I wholesale were like, people are just dangerous. There was no time or ability to differentiate and to be able to look for what someone who is invested in having a relationship with you, a loving one, what that looks like. To me, everyone was a threat. Every possible climate for abuse or neglect or not seeing me. And so I think I've had to make and speak, to myself about, this is why this person is not your mom. This is why this person is like your mom. You have to be able to discern who those people are, and they will do that in their words and actions, and just consistently, it takes time. But I my natural inclination with any sort of wounding with people or communities or practices that means something to me, that I care about deeply, any sort of upset, my first inclination is always like, okay, no, I gotta leave. Like this cannot possibly be safe for me. And so
that fight or flight response.
That fight or flight. And I'm a flight all day, baby. Like I'm an Aries too. I'm just like, nah, like, but my fight is not necessarily external. I fight myself. Mm-hmm. When the heartbreak happens, I directly relate it to an inability to trust myself. It's like, see, that's why we don't do this with people.
Right. Listen, oh my God, that is so common. Like we do that all the time. That it's like when it turned out to be how it possibly could have been, then it's just like, oh, see, we are affirming. Mm-hmm. We are affirming. We're getting the thing that we needed to make us feel safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the confirmation of, hey, just kind of keep being you feels way more safe than, hey, go out there and be somebody bold, brave, and daring. Yep. That feels a lot harder for us to do. So,
true.
Yeah, no,
so pray for me, girl.
listen, all the time. You are like always in my thoughts and in my heart.
Same.
So we've talked a little bit about kind of the line running through the ways in which you used to shrink and then your work in progress. But talk to us a little bit about that area where you're just like, you know what, I feel my most confident in not being small here. I feel my most confident in being in my truth here. Tell us about that.
I think for me, the biggest thing was really like acting upon my own guidance or the guidance that I receive. Mm-hmm. And that has looked two ways mostly in my life, in the last 3 years. Number one, being tapped in ways that feel good to me with the expansiveness of kind of the ecosystem of life, spirituality, the systems of connection, just being able to expand into the love of my ancestors, feeling called or listening to my interpretation of spirit or folks who are non-embodied that are invested in my evolution as like a being. So being able to like hear and receive that guidance, and also acting on that guidance and acting on the guidance that I get from my body, whether that's emotions, aches and pains, just ways that I even feel myself when I'm uncomfortable. Like I look at my body, like, how are you sitting when you're with this person? Like I really have done a great job of listening to and acting upon the guidance that I receive. Mm-hmm. And that has actually been one of the only ways that I could stop shrinking and that I could continue to work on the places that are still hard for me, is being able to have a relationship with the guidance that comes through me, whether it's from my physical body or it's from spirit, and being able to make decisions from that place. Mm-hmm. That's one thing about, like, I got a lot that is not, I'm like, ooh, baby. But one thing about me is I will listen, receive, kind of hear information, and then I will make choices from that place, which has been an amazing and incredible, like I almost feel like a passenger sometimes in watching how I'm like, oh, okay, you made that choice because you felt this way when this person said this thing, or because you were walking, down the street and you felt or you saw, and so you made different choices. I think when we were talking before, the choosings, my choosings come from a place of being willing to act on my own guidance.
No, I love that. And I think so much of our wounding too, especially in ways of shrinking, and when we talk about relationship to childhood, just over the time in which our intuition kind of becomes so quiet, it's almost like invisible, so to speak. And so I love the idea that you being reconnected, kind of like this reunion with your full self, and being able to listen and hear, because that is one of the hardest things that what we were calling our intuition, right, is from a place of experience. And so if all of our experience, like you said, is giving us this word that is not good or not positive for us, that starts to become our truth. And so I love the idea that your evolution looks like being able to reconnect with your full self, and obviously with some help and some guidance.
Yeah.
Sometimes if left to our own devices, ain't no telling what we would be out here doing.
And I think the first sort of how that began, or how that begun to be something that was even a viable way for me to live, is I had to go through the process of being okay with being in my body, which I think that is complicated and complex and really hard for so many reasons. Because of the violence that is enacted on the body. It then becomes easier to disassociate or like leave the body behind. So I first had to accept that this is it. This is my body. All the things that have happened to it. This is the body that is carrying me. So I had to accept that reality. And I had to notice first, because what it started out was not just like these this is nice. It was pain. I paid attention to my pain, where that was located, what that felt like. That was sort of my first kind of step in being able to trust the guidance. I had to know how my body worked. I had to know what it felt like when it was, sorry, boo. Oh, I had to know what it felt like when it was in fear, when it felt like it wasn't seen, when it felt like it was somewhere that didn't feel good. I had to, and those happen to be the loudest things for me still to this day. My pain is a lot louder than my pleasure. But through being able to know my body, connect to it, then I could trust it, which means that I can now use it as a compass for me. I can use it as a surefire direction. I can use that as a really big support in helping me make choices that keep expanding me and then don't shrink me. And when I am on the verge of, or even when I do act in ways that are shrinking, my body lets me know, like, we're small right now, right? Okay, that's fine. Like you grown, but we're small. Okay, just as long as you
right. know. Your body's like, you done effed up, right?
Right, like box, right?
Right.
Hey, but I'm gonna be here with you. I'm here with you. I'm here with you. And maybe the next time we'll make a different choice. It's all good. But yeah, I
love that you said I can continue to make choices that keep expanding me.
Yeah.
Because I think that when I know, and I know some people maybe listening to this might be thinking, well, why can't you be big? Why can't people just exist at this certain fullness? But there's a certain comfort in the routine. There's a certain comfort in the habit. And again, it's it's like they say, the devil that you do now. So even shrinking, it might have risk associated with it, but it doesn't feel nearly as scary as doing that unknown thing out there. And so even our relationships with our bodies, filling them and inhabiting them. And like you said, it's definitely this complicated relationship for so many of us, especially because literally the physical things that have happened to us, right? In some instances. And then there's the other side of it where, like our bodies, like there's so much, as Audre Lorde says, so much incentive in the world that exists for us not to feel.
Absolutely.
Right? And so when we're like, oh, this is a pain, we think that we can go be more productive. Or like you said, I can start, being a hyper work person because at least I can control that. Yep. And so it's all these things that are trying to get us to, like I always say, like, we can't out hustle what our body feels. And so much of our time and labor often can be tied up in that because we just think like, oh, I feel this source of pain. And hell, so many of us even have shame around feeling pain.
Yeah.
Like we feel bad. Like I feel bad for even feeling bad. I feel bad that I even let that get to me. I feel bad that I even am impacted by that experience. And so when we even are dealing with that, it's no wonder that it's like, don't want to feel nothing that is related to this.
Done. I know. And, it just makes me think about too, like this thing of choosing, or like how you make decisions. And I feel like tending to my relationship with my body, with being embodied, with being able to trust myself and my body, was really connected to this thing of me wanting to know who in me is doing the choosing, wanting to feel good about like the places from which I was making decisions, being able to better pinpoint, like, okay, is this my 5-year-old making the decision? Is this my fear of commitment making this decision? Is this my fear of not getting validation behind this decision? So, and again, this is not cute. Like, this is not cute work. It isn't. It's not work. But I think, especially in the next, this year, the coming months, I feel like my wish for all of us is to know more intimately and feel more deeply connected to the places where we're making decisions, and being really on board and okay and feeling satisfied in how we're making decisions, and having it be organic and authentic to who we are, all aspects of us, even the ones that, are scared or do feel ashamed, to be able to recognize and hold space for all of those places within us, so that we can begin to be more conscious and considerate of how and why we're making choices. Ultimately, and be more compassionate to ourselves. Like, that's like all of what I'm talking about is really a roundabout way to receive more grace from myself. Like that's really it. And so I just wish that so much, in the pursuit of being able to give ourselves and other people more grace, is to just kind of expand into being curious about and supporting places in us that make decisions that are nourishing, that are active, and that don't keep us small, because we deserve and have earned the right to be so expansive. So, yeah.
No, I love the specifics that you layer in terms of saying where you making those, decisions from. My baseline, what I've been using is, if I'm making decisions from a place of lack or scarcity, I know I'm already doing the wrong thing. And that can be, that can be a lot. To have to be honest about that, to have to be like looking at yourself and be like, dang, wow, you really don't think you deserve that, do you? Or you really don't think that it will come to be true, and why, So it definitely is a thing. It's a very succinct way of looking at it for me. And it's something that keeps me, it just makes it really tangible. It's just like, if you're making this, like, I don't care how you're making the decision or why you're going to make it, but if you're making it from this place, know that is something that you need to pay attention to.
Yeah. Again, sorry about that. Phones on do not disturb, but people know if they call me 3 times, it will get through. So.
Oh, wow. Is that how it works? I've never put my phone on do not disturb.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do that just to say I did it one time.
Do you feel, are there indicators for you when you're thinking about or trying to discern whether you're making a decision out of a place of lack? Are there ways that like, oh, Julia, that's how you know that you're doing that?
I think it really is rooted in what you said about, is this a thing that's going to allow me to be expansive?
Got you.
Right. So it's like kind of what we're talking about, shrinking and being expansive. And so for me, that looks like, is this a thing that is going to let me expand, or is it a thing that is asking me to be smaller than what I believe is possible?
Right.
For me. So I think that's kind of the criteria that I'm looking at.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love that. I love it.
So is there anything, before we get out of here, Des, is there anything that you like to leave folks with, or something that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to?
Yeah. And I think I didn't until just thinking back to the conversation that we had earlier. Just again, in these days and times when there are so many ways to be in this world, to experience life, to want things for yourself and people that you love. I'm thinking a lot about just ideas of having your own barometer for knowing what freedom feels like for you, and knowing that it may look very different from how other people in your life envision what freeness is, what expansiveness is. But to spend some time thinking about what that feels like for you. Mm-hmm. And then that can also be a way to orient you towards decision-making or paths or actions or people who support your idea of your individual sort of freeness. Mm-hmm. Or bigness or expansiveness, and to not be afraid if it looks differently than people in your life, because we're all parts of a larger whole that, you know, we can't necessarily see at the time that it's happening, but these indicators or these gauges or these questions for discernment, I think, are just so critical in helping to connect us to these individual freedom dreams, which will align with other people sometimes, but sometimes there's a piece of it that's just for you, that's just for you and your expression of your work or the divine, and to be open to that and to hearing that, even if it is very different than even what you've done a year ago, to follow that thread, to trust those places where you're like, okay, I see the people that I've been organizing with or doing things with want this way, but I'm feeling like for me, I maybe want to tweak it a little bit. Keep tweaking that freedom dream, because we all benefit from that. We all of us in the collective, especially those of us who are interested in otherwise worlds or other possibilities. Yeah, there's blueprints. There's blueprints in all of us, and so right. please don't be afraid to lean into and express any tweaks to what freedom may look like or feel like to you. Yeah, don't be afraid to lean into that.
No, I love it. So you said we have to keep tweaking our freedom dreams.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think also the other piece that I loved that you just told folks is that sometimes, like, it's just literally you also accepting that how life is for you now might be radically different than how it used to be or how you envision it in being. So I know that can be a lot because, like, you know, our conversation earlier, you know, we have our habits and our habits have been with us a really long time, typically. So that means that the new you is having to catch up.
Yeah.
You know, or get away from, so to speak, the old you. And then what do you do to fill in that gap? What do you do to fill in that time? So it can definitely be uncomfortable, but I think we just have to be okay. When we are uncomfortable, we have to be willing to lean into the discomfort because it's there to show us something, right? Sometimes the discomfort is literally there to keep us safe.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's just there to remind us of the potential and the promise that is over our life if we, as you said, lean into it. So as Des said, y'all, we got to keep tweaking those freedom dreams.
And you can also too, you know, sometimes I think of it too as like an integration of, because that self, like that, you know, even a year ago would not have made some of the same decisions. She's still here.
Right.
But she doesn't necessarily have to do the deciding. She is not the person that decides how I'm going to continue to, you know, stop shrinking. It is the me who has accumulated all of those experiences, integrating all of that to be able to hold fast to a life and a beingness that is expansive, which is something that is important to me. So if it is important to you, no matter how long or how hard it, you know, don't worry about all that. If it is important, if it's something that you want, just bringing that into your awareness, I think is enough. And it's a huge start. It's a huge start.
Especially, and I love that you also the distinction of saying, hey, just because you're getting ready to do a new thing in this season doesn't mean that everything you were and who you were is not of usefulness anymore. Like, it doesn't have to be an either or.
Yep.
It's not the either or. But I love the idea of like, but who is in charge now, right? Like, not everybody can be moving, everybody can be making all the decisions at the same time. So somebody got to steer the ship. It's your more new evolving self that is steering the ship.
Totally.
Guys, this has been great. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and taking the time out to chat with me.
Pleasure. It's just I'm like, well, I'm like low-key obsessed with you. So I'm just like staring at you in the video, like, oh.
We both got on our hair wraps today.
Got the memo. Because what did you say earlier? The little fro, we weren't trying
to fight in with this. Some days I just don't feel like it. And so, because part of I'm so used to having a haircut. So my hair is like shaped a certain kind of way. So I don't have to do a whole lot of maneuvering the hair. But with that haircut, it's like, oh, I have hair here. And then I have like a shag. And I'm just...
the wild, wild west out here. It's not...
out here thugging. So, yeah.
Awesome.
I love you, Des.
I love you. Thank you for being in community with me and teaching me so much and allowing me to not shrink. Like,
listen, we got to do that for each other. We got to constantly remember. Like I said, real friends remind each other the promises we made to ourselves, and so that's what we got to do for each other.
Yeah.
Love you, girl.
Love you too. Mwah.